Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. There's a pile of stuff to get into, and we're excited to do it. Feeling angry? I am too. We'll be talking about why everyone's so angry these days and what the data is and what that says behind all of it. Secondly, we'll be talking about, wow, these Palestine protests really raking it across the universities in this country and what's happening, what's going on, and what are their demands, and will the government honor those? As well, Pat King doing his thing. We'll be covering that with all the convoy protests and all the jazz that finally he's going to be in court over it. And then as well, last but not least, we have the amazing, the wonderful, the electric Jennifer L. joining us to talk about conservative nomination practices and stuff that's going on in the party and how some sketchy things are happening that need to be addressed. This and so much more. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
I'm doing good. I had lots of time in the sun today, so feeling good. I'm kind of like solar charged, right? So
solar charged.
As soon as I go out there, I'm just like, ooh, this is what I was built for.
This guy's a real hippie.
I am. I got the hair for it right now and everything. I was telling you before the show, I got my hair. I'm going to go to the barber on Thursday because I've got my one guy that I go to faithfully. I feel like if I go to anybody else, I'm cheating. So.
Absolutely. I hear that, dude. I hear that. I feel the same about my barber too.
Yeah. So I gotta stay true to him, and he was all booked up for the past 3 weeks. So every day I go into work, I'm just like trying to do something with this mop. But
I hear you, man. I'm in the same boat. Right now with my hair, and it's a whole mess up there too.
Oh man. What are we doing?
What are we doing?
We look like a bunch of leftists.
Yeah. We just might be. We're undercover out here.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm super stoked. There's so much to get into today, but overall, it's been a decent week, and I think the reason why it's been decent for me is because I took some time off the internet, and imagine with that, I felt happier.
I think that was what it was for me too, because I didn't turn on Twitter. I didn't look at anything really. I just looked at stupid memes, and that was about it. And I spent most of the weekend, because it was beautiful, spent most of it outside. So yeah, I felt good. I was like, man, nothing crazy happened in politics. And then I opened it up today and I was like, crap. There was stuff. I was like, wow, the world was so good. It was like, nah, you just unplugged for a bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, man. I started going through Twitter and TikTok and all this, and I was like, oh, yep, still crazy. Holy smokes. Well, let's, without any further ado, sir, let's get right on into it. So we came across some data today of the anger index here in Canada, and it's not good, and it's looking a little rough. And we talked about it, obviously, a few weeks ago where the RCMP is like, well, prepare, we're having an angrier world, a lot more crime's going to go, blah, blah, blah. And we all knew that. RCMP themselves documented this. Well, we got some data behind all of that and why people have gotten so angry, why it's so high, and where we've come from.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because one of the things I did today on Twitter was I was like, I'm going to follow every index I can find out there, because a lot of times some of these things that are being collected, we just don't know about them, right? Because if it doesn't fit the narrative, it doesn't, make it to CBC or CTV or Global or any of them. And so these kind of fall by the wayside. I think CTV actually did pick this up a couple days ago, but it just didn't gain traction because nobody really knew about it. And like I said, didn't fit the narrative. But what it is, it's a survey done by Polera, and so they are a part of the Canadian Research Insights Council. So they actually have to sign away waivers and rules saying that they are going to abide by certain ethical standards and certain research codes of conduct, and that they are actually going to weight their averages. And so when they're making sweeping statements about a nation, that it's weighted based off of location, age, gender, all the demographic metrics. So it's something that you can actually look at and you go, oh, okay, I trust this, and because it's an accredited institution. And so in April, they surveyed 1,507 Canadians. And what they did was they asked the questions on the RAGE index, it's called. So looking at 6 questions. So the performance of the federal government, the performance of the provincial government, the state of the Canadian economy, personal financial situations, social change occurring in Canada, and then news stories that are currently in the headlines. And so one of the things that they actually focused on that was really interesting, they did a whole deep dive into the Canadian budget. But first, though, angry. So it was kind of funny because obviously Ontario right now, they're the most angry in the country.
Yeah.
And then and this is where I thought this was kind of funny because I just said that they're credible, but one of the things that they did on one of their slides was they found that Albertans and Ontarians are the most angry. And I was like, well, you've put down that 58% of the population of Alberta was rated as very angry. And then also BC was also 58. So it's like, why didn't you say Alberta and BC? Why was it just Alberta singled out? But then also Atlantic Canada, 59% of us are angry.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, we kind of beat out Alberta here. So
actually, just a quick question though. What was the scale that they were working with? Like, is it like angry, very angry, or how did that work?
So they were using a Likert scale. So with basically 5 being very angry, 4 being moderately angry or annoyed, 3 being neutral, 2 being, you're not angry, you actually like a policy or you're happy, and then 1 being very happy. So the only way I could see that it would make sense is if people scored higher in that extreme anger category in Alberta versus BC. But they unfortunately don't go into that level of detail in their notes. So it's just kind of one of those things that's kind of funny, especially when you look at the fact that 59% of Atlantic Canadians are scoring that they're very angry to, angry. But anyway, what was really cool about this information, though, was that when they broke it down to the budget, because that was one thing that caused a lot of anger, they said that $40 billion worth of deficit spending made everybody mad in every province, across age groups, across political voting spectrums. Nobody was happy about that.
Hey.
They were all quite PO'd about it.
Oh man, at least I wasn't alone. That feels nice.
Yeah, feel validated because the rest of Canada's with you. But what I thought was also interesting was the fact that when you look at the things that were most popular in the budget, though, when you look at Atlantic Canada, it's very big on the social programs. So this is where I think like the NDP could actually they could have a foothold if they were to focus more on some of these things like the school food programs, mental health care, contraceptives and diabetes, Canadian disability benefit, and then childcare centers. So it's a lot of social programming issues. Whereas when you're looking at Alberta and BC, it's more focused on housing and infrastructure needs. And I wonder if part of that, because I just recently saw in the CBC actually that Halifax has had like one of the greatest housing booms, like second to none in the country right now. So I think that because we're starting to see so many cranes and so many things being built right now in the city, and Halifax is, I think it's over 50% of the population of Nova Scotia, that's going to skew your information quite a bit. So that's probably also why you're seeing such a move towards more of these social programs and less on the housing front, because Ontario is the same thing. They had building housing on federal land. That was a big thing for them. That was number 5 out of the top popular things. But all this to say, what was really interesting, though, if we go down just a little bit there, feelings towards the Canadian budget, it was interesting that once people put their spin on it, then suddenly everybody was like, oh, I guess I'm not as angry with the budget. So you just have to spin it a few more times and then it sounds a little bit better.
Is that what this is saying?
Yep. Feelings towards the budget improve after hearing about it, but Canadians are still more negative than positive.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So it was very interesting when you look at also to who is happy with the budget and who's not happy with the budget. Obviously conservatives, very wildly unhappy. Only 1% of conservatives said that they were happy with the budget. But when you look at the Liberals, though, liberal voters, because this is what this is not members of parliament. This is people who identify as a Liberal voter. 50% of them say like, the budget doesn't really do anything for me. I'm just neutral. I don't like it. I don't hate it. That's pretty bad. If this is your party's budget and you're going, half the voters are just like meh about it, that's not what you want. That doesn't win you an election. So all this to say, this was an incredible piece of work that was done. And this is something that they've been doing for the past 2 years. And I think that they actually update it every 2-3 months. So they try and do it in quarters. So we'll have to check in again in another 2 to 3 months to see what has changed, because they said that this poll that they just did rated us as the most angry since they started doing this, that it just keeps going up and up and up and up.
And when did they start doing it?
They started doing this 2 years ago.
Okay, so we're working off 2 years of data, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, you take it for what it's worth and what's worth of salt. 2 years is still important. It's still like a good kind of amount of time where it's like the fact that it's only increased over time is concerning. But at the same time, it didn't start in 2008 either, or 2000. So like there's not a whole swath of data to really go by, but it is interesting to kind of like, okay, you got to gauge where people are at. And as this government keeps releasing things, people seem to get more angry. It's kind of the progression we're seeing, the trend that we are witnessing at this point. And I think what's interesting about where the feelings towards the budget improve or change after hearing about it. I thought the very angry line was really interesting, where 19% of respondents were very angry, which decreased down to 10% after hearing about the budget. And then seeing 34% being annoyed or moderately angry, decreasing down to 30%. And then seeing the neutral emotion increase from 38 to 42% after hearing about it. And I think there really is something to that in a lot of ways, where time goes by, you start hearing people's perspectives on it. It kind of eases the emotions, which is essentially, unfortunately, that's kind of a media's job at this point.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, all right, let's dissipate the frustrations, dissipate like your emotions that you're feeling right now. Is kind of what's working the facts. And that's essentially what that whole situation is and what's happening. And that's why people tune into shows like ours, where we're going to do our best not to sugarcoat it for you, but we're also not going to paint the world as the worst thing ever, unless it's necessary.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is there was elements of that budget that I think are great. Like the fact that they want to release federal lands and build homes on it. Like, I think that's an awesome idea. I know where that idea came from. I don't know, maybe the Conservative Party, who keeps talking about how they want to turn the CBC headquarters into housing. Yeah. I don't know. It seems like it's a federal property that they want to alleviate from the burden of Canadians. But it's also interesting, like some of the other things too, like food programs for students. Like, I think that's great. I'm all about feeding children. That is your future. You want them to be well-fed, well-educated, bright, young minds. That's what we want in this country. So yeah, I think that's great. And I think that we also have a severe lack of childcare services. So supporting childcare, I think that's great. What I don't think is great is the thing that everybody else is mad about, $40 billion worth of deficit. And so that's kind of one of the things where I'm looking at the incoming government. And I'll say that because I think that's pretty much where it's going based on all the polls that we see, where Pierre Poilievre has said, we're not going to spend more money unless we find savings for that money. And I'm like, that's where we need to be. We need to tighten the purse strings. We need to take care of what's important, like the kids. But at the same time, we also need to cut the fat on things that are just not worth the cost. Oh God, I just use it.
They're in your head now.
Gross.
Get out of my head, Pierre. Get out. No, the thing that I really thought was interesting was, he talked about how people are really angry about essentially the amount of money that's being spent. And yet the messaging from the Liberals is they're starting to go into that whole, the Conservatives are going to be about austerity measures. That's what they're going to be about. And they're trying to scare people of like all the programs are going to cut, this, that, the other. And based on these numbers, it's telling me like people are like, yeah, I hope he cuts it all. Like, people are not fearful of all the programs that are going to be cut, at least not the majority of people, at least based on these numbers we're seeing, which I thought was interesting.
I don't know if that's my interpretation. Because when I'm looking at the things that are getting the most likes here, the mental health supports, the social supports for farmer care, basically what we're seeing there. And like, I'll be honest when I say that, like, I'm not against pharmacare. I'm against how pharmacare is being delivered in this context. I think that it would be great if we had our own development of drugs, kind of like what New Zealand did it was either New Zealand or Australia that I actually used the universities to produce their own drugs and funded them to actually develop new drugs as well, so that they kept the patent and the IP in the country and then developed things. And then when they wanted outside pharmaceuticals, those companies had to then compete with the government-based system, and so that it wasn't to their disadvantage. Whereas our country, they're just going to sell it off to the lowest at this moment bidder, and then those pharmaceuticals are going to have us buy the NADs, because we've promised these contraceptives, we promised this diabetes medication, and we have to deliver on it, and we've already signed the contract. So then they can just start upping the price, and we lose our bargaining power. And that's where I think that we're making a mistake with this. But to go back to the original point, though, I do think that these things are big, and that the social problems and so-called remedies that they're offering in the budget, I think they are resonating with people, because if you look, like, that's what people care the most about. So I do think if they lean into that austerity measures kind of government rhetoric, it could hurt the Conservatives. But I think that the Conservatives just need to lean into the fact that, the Liberal government right now is living on a hope and a prayer. They're not actually grounded in reality. And that's the case that we're dealing with right now, and that it's all smoke and mirrors, and that there needs to be finances to back this up, and there just isn't right now.
The numbers just don't add up.
They don't.
Yep. I hear that, dude. And do you know what else doesn't add up? Some of these demands these protesters are making at these Canadian universities, sir. Dude, craziness.
I read a couple of them on the weekend, and this was the political side that I dived into on the weekend, because it was funny. It was just like, what's happening in Palestine obviously isn't funny, but these demands by these students.
Don't smirk, Reg. Don't smirk.
I can't help it.
Gee, he doesn't care about Palestine.
Oh, wow. My God.
What a guy. Clip that. I'm sorry. Go on.
We're going to have to do like a whole blooper reel of just like stupid stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. But yeah, so obviously I care about what's happening in Palestine, but these are just outrageous. And then I don't get what the mouse thing with the weird ear piercings and the army boots is supposed to represent, but you'll see. Have a look at this.
Yeah. So obviously what we've been seeing, I guess, to sum this all up at the moment, we're been seeing it throughout the news. A lot of these pro-Palestine protesters, and I'm going to leave that in quotations, are taking up space and create encampments at a lot of universities across the country, across North America. And school that I work at, NASCAD, students, here's the thing about NASCAD. There's nothing to occupy at NASCAD because we don't actually, they don't have a lawn. They just have buildings that are like literally right in the city center, essentially. So there's nothing to occupy. But that didn't stop the students from making their demands. And I'll say quote unquote students, because I don't believe it's actually students who are really driving this. But here's what they demand, and this is what the NASCAD students have demanded of the school. Number one, public disclosure of the entirety of the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University investment portfolio. Number two, immediate divestment from all weapons manufacturing, military supplying, and companies operating in Israel or the occupied Palestinian territories. Number three, in response to emails sent from Dr. Shannon regarding the rights and responsibilities for students and faculty to speak truth to power and exercise their academic freedom, an apology from and the resignation of the president of the NASCAD University, Dr. Peggy Shannon. 4, anti-oppression training for all faculty and administration at NASCAD, watch out Josh, focusing particularly on queerness, ingenuity, I can't pronounce it. Gee. And
that training.
Yeah, apparently. And anti-colonialism. Number 5, free tuition for all students. Let's go. Number 6, free housing for all students. Okay. Number 7, the implementation of a Palestinian art history course. All right. Number 8, a scholarship offering free tuition and housing for one student currently living in Palestine. Number 9, that the NASCAD Board of Governors be made up entirely of students, faculty, and staff with at least 50% plus one seat on the board being held by students. Number 10, that NASCAD University moves all its banking to a credit union. Interesting. Number 11, the immediate breaking of the lease of NASCAD with the Port Authority regarding NASCAD's port campus and a commitment of no financial dealings with the Port Authority going forward. And last but not least, number 12, sweet 12, that all funds divested through the process of realizing the above demands be reinvested in the rebuilding of universities from the Gaza Strip that have been destroyed. Free Palestine.
So the worst part is like reading this. I read the first one. I was like, okay, you know, I like transparency in investing. Then the second one where it was like divesting of weapons manufacturing and militarization. I'm like, okay, I can get behind that. Like you're in art school, like you don't want your investments being used for war. Cool, I'm down with that. Then they're like, we need an apology and the resignation of the president. I was like, well, that's not going to win you any seats. Okay. And then the next one, it was like mandatory sensitivity training for everyone. I was like, okay, so we've gotten outrageous. And then it just keeps going and going. And then it was funny because one of the things too, where they were saying free tuition, free housing for all students, but then also like later on being like, there needs to be a scholarship set up for Palestinian students.
Yeah,
and I was
just
like,
one of them though.
Yeah. But I was like, but if it's free for all students, like why would you need the scholarship? And also what's up with the Port Authority? Do you know anything more about that than I do?
This is that it's connected to the government.
Oh my God.
That's all.
Anyway, I was just like, the Port Authority's been doing like a lot of good work down on the waterfront. So I don't understand what the beef is with them. But then like using the credit union, I'm like, cool, that sounds like a good idea. Like
Yeah.
credit unions, good way to go. Banks are evil. So
Keep it local.
yep, I'm down with that. And then all the funds that are going to be divested, as if that there's going to be just money flowing, right? Like, are you guys stupid? Do you realize how much universities actually receive from governments to keep the lights on? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off this conversation by saying I do not represent the views or feelings of NASCAD as an entity. These are completely my own. And after you hear them, you'll realize they're definitely my own. This stuff's a joke. This is clearly a joke. This is like, I'm so over all these protests in general at this point because they've shown their true colors. We talked about a couple weeks ago. When you're advocating for the death of a whole group of people, you lost me. And what I've been seeing is, again, pro-Palestine, like BLM was used in 2020, there's a group of people, and I will say it because they've labeled themselves as such, is there's literally communists using this as a guise to push communist ideals. That's why none of this really applies to NASCAD much. A lot of it just random demands of that make no sense. And you can tell because that has nothing to do with it. And you can tell people are involved in this that don't really know what they're talking about. And I see that clear as day. We already have people from the group of communists here in the city that already do not like us and continue to harass us on all of our socials here and there. And we're definitely not going to win any fans with this, but this is what's starting to happen. We're seeing this at U of T, now seeing it here in Halifax and NASCAD. The fact that you're going to divest all things shows that, again, there's no research. Did you all forget that back in 2011, NASCAD almost got bought out by Dow because they were running out of cash? Did you know they were still being propped up by debt since? They haven't been making any money. These guys it's a miracle they're even still operating. They're still debating on what real estate they're going to sell of theirs so that they can survive going forward. They have no money, kind of like their students. So that's where things are at right now. So all these demands are a joke and they're clear as day for what they are. These people are not operating in good faith. They don't really care about Palestine. They care about pushing a certain ideology. And I honestly am sad for the people of Gaza because their cause is just being absolutely trampled all over through the process.
Well, the reason why we can say that with evidence is the fact that like offering free housing and free tuition, not to the Palestinian person. Remember, they get a scholarship. One. Mm-hmm. What does free housing and free tuition do for any of the people in the Gaza Strip? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That is completely self-interested. And this is exactly what you're saying. Like, there's just like things shoehorned in every which way. It was like a fever dream of a list of demands. And this is what I'm noticing, even with other protests across the country too. It's just like, it is this confluence of weird ideology happening under, like you said, the guise of this is to support the Gaza Strip and the people who are currently living through a war. but it has nothing to do with that at all. And it's like, if you actually were caring about those people, maybe you would be reaching out to whatever support networks are trying to get aid through. You'd be working with government. You'd be lobbying government to actually help get aid through right now where it's not. Like, you know what I mean? You'd be doing things that are humanitarian in nature. You wouldn't be asking for free tuition and free housing for yourself. Like, so talk about self-interested.
And you'd also be speaking about the fact that Hamas is seizing any aid that's going through.
There you go.
And those who are just listening, that's just me making twitchy faces right now because it's freaking ridiculous. Like, these people are not serious. They do not care. They care about causing more chaos here in our country and causing chaos here in the West. That's what this is about. This is what it's been about since day one. And I'll firmly say that right now. And this is disgusting. This is disgusting what's happening. Using something as horrific as war that's happening across the world to use to push your ideas and pressure government officials is disgusting. You are literally, we've been talking about women and children and all this. You are using the deaths of innocent women and children for your own cause, and I won't have it, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate because I don't think everybody's in that camp, because you get a lot of good people that are caught up in a narrative that they don't even realize that they're a part of, because people are looking at the images coming out of Gaza, and they're looking at the death toll that's rising and the horrific horror stories that you're hearing, and people's hearts are going out to them, and they want to feel like they're doing something. And unfortunately, what I'm looking at is I'm going, this ain't it, unfortunately, right? That's what it comes down to. Nobody wants a war. Nobody wants to see people suffering. If it was my children that were, scared for their life and that bombs were raining down on them, I too would be horrified and be in the same situation. But the problem is that this isn't it. I don't know how any other way to say it, that this is not how you help people. And this is, in fact, like you said, just co-opting a whole other idea. And by supporting it and propping it up, even with the best of intentions, you're actually contributing to the cause, which is unfortunate.
And I'll give you an example. BLM 2020. This happened during one of the protests. I believe it was in New York or Baltimore, one of the two. But they were marching. And the organizers were leading them away. Then all of a sudden, it didn't take much. Those random people who weren't leading the cause started directing the traffic to a different area and got the whole group to move, and then started busting stuff up, and got the whole crowd going and started all this shenanigans. And that's what I'm saying. And you think you brought up a good point. There's people who are involved who really have good hearts about this, who really their heartstrings are being pulled on this, and they want to see good happen. But it's just a select few people who are able to manipulate crowds and manipulate the thinking that then use it for negative consequences.
Well, it comes back to that whole idea of like this weird dichotomy that's being created, a false dichotomy where it's like you have to be pro Hamas and pro the Palestine protests and everything like that, or you're against human life. It's like, no, two things can be true here. And also, you don't have to agree with every single thing there. Maybe you do have things that people are protesting about that you do agree with, but you don't have to agree with the whole laundry list. And what I'm finding is that it's like, you're either with us or you're against us. You have to accept all of it. You have to accept all 12 ridiculous demands, when actually investing your money, not in military companies or using credit union, those actually sound like a good idea. Transparency in your investments, also a good idea. The rest of it's garbage. But the problem is that you can't say that right now, because basically it's like, well, you can't have a different opinion. You have to pick one or the other. And that's where I just caution people, where, think through some of these things, use that logical part of your brain, as well as the, the empathy that you have as well for people who are struggling. Realize that this is a smokescreen for something else, and then really find ways that you can contribute that aren't this.
Yeah. And I will clarify too, and they're extremists 100%. I've seen the interviews on the ground, but just want to correct one thing, is that I don't think a lot of these people are saying that they're advocating for being pro-Hamas. I think that's a very extreme perspective. There are people who are. I've seen the news clippings, but I want to believe that most people aren't feeling that way. But they are, super pro-Palestine, down with Israel, this, that, the other, when they really don't fully know what's going on over there. None of us really do. Some of us have a better idea than others. But it's just like, there's just so much emotion attached to this. And summertime is the time for this stuff to happen. Anytime there's a big political event happening south of the border, the summer before, things get crazy. And this is right on schedule. And this is just another thing.
And not to mention the fact that also everybody's angry right now in Canada. We just spent a whole segment talking about that.
That's true.
So obviously, maybe take a weekend, unplug, think things through before you jump into a protest, because you might wind yourself up in jail.
Yeah. Just for a night or so. Who knows?
Or 5 months.
Or 5 months. Yeah, Pat King, man. Speaking of big protests that happened, Pat King, one of the organizers of the convoy, finally getting his court hearing. Finally started today, which would have been Monday, May 13th. I want to make sure I clarify for those who are listening at the moment. And this was crazy, man. So it's good that he's finally getting his court hearing and all this. But the fact that even he has to have one is crazy in the first place. The fact that the convoy organizers have been demonized the way they have, that I still haven't seen the previous protests we were talking about that happened with the organizers of that. And it's really crazy.
Yeah, well, the fact that what blew me away was that he spent 5 months in jail before he was even granted bail.
Yeah.
The fact, that's wild. He was 5 months in jail. And so he's now before the courts. So like you said, day one, he's been charged with 9 different counts. So everything from mischief to inciting mischief to just ridiculous things, completely the point of a protest, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's pled non-guilty to all counts. But they said that they're going to book out 3 weeks of court time for this because they expect it to be a long one.
Yeah.
And they're using posts. One of the things too was that he actually live streamed a lot of things on the ground. So I think it was his account actually that filmed or at least reposted the trampling by the police horses when they trampled that lady. Mm-hmm. So he's got a lot on his side to be able to use in his court case, but there's also been so much smear out there that it's going to be an interesting one to follow for sure.
Yeah, he's right up there with the Nazis apparently, right? So that's the narrative he's combating with, along with the fact that this has been 2 years ago now, and people just want to be done with it and be moving on. He's fighting an uphill battle, and I think the powers that be, I think that's definitely was a part of this whole mentality. Just let's drag this out. Let's make sure we try to just elongate it so we can minimize the amount of anger we're going to stir up with this one. Mm-hmm. Because they made a lot of people angry when it first happened. And people lost a lot of hope in what this country was about when it did happen. And they just definitely didn't want to keep kicking that hornet's nest with this one.
Yeah, I keep coming back to what Stu said last episode when he was saying that normally when you get this much discontent, that normally there would be an election to relieve that pressure, and it doesn't feel like we're going to get that, so it's just going to keep mounting. And like you said, I think that there's so many angry people that just want this convoy stuff to be done that he is going to be fighting against all of that. And I'm hoping he's got some good lawyers. Depends on if that money was seized, because they raised quite a bit of money just by crowdsourcing it. So if any of that is going towards his court case, who knows? But yeah, I hope he's got some good lawyers, because he's going to be fighting an uphill battle, like you said.
Yeah. So, we want to make sure this takes place in the best way possible, with the best faith possible. We hope that the right proceedings go through in terms of that this just gets dealt with and no shenanigans happen, which, well,
with this government, come on.
One can pray, but that's all I really ask, which is crazy to think that that's a tall task in this country at this point. But just if he just gets a fair shake, he'll be just fine, which we know that won't happen. But
that bar is so low, we're tripping over it.
We are, dude. It's so painful. But yeah, send the good vibes that hopefully this gets figured out, because this is the fact that he spent any time over this is ridiculous and it's stupid, and that it's all because of the rhetoric that was stirred up around it. If that rhetoric doesn't exist and it's not talked about the way it was talked about in the House of Commons, no, this guy's living his life. Moving on. Him, Tamara Lich, Mr. Barber, all three of them. Mm-hmm. So, gee. Well, I guess speaking of that, we got some more shenanigans to get into as we bring Jennifer L on. We are going to be getting into this whole Conservative nomination race that took place out in Aurora, Oak Ridge's Richmond Hill, where just some slimy stuff was happening in the Conservative nomination race that was spoken about loudly by Sabrina on TikTok and other social media platforms as well, of what's going on and making people aware of what's happening in the nomination race, because apparently the Conservatives are not talking about it. And this really upset Jennifer on that she felt like this needs to be talked about, because we've talked about when it happens to the Liberal Party. We talk about it when it happens to other parties in the country. We need to also address it when it happens to the Conservatives as well. It needs to be addressed across the country so that we have proper election processes. And so this was a really frustrating thing, and we want to make sure we get down to the bottom of it. And we brought Jennifer on to chat about it. So Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Glad to have you. So we've talked about this a little bit off air and kind of getting your understanding of what you're seeing out there. What's happening? I know that you have been following this pretty closely. What's happening from your perspective?
Yeah, so Sabrina had announced the other day that she was suspending her campaign, not necessarily, I don't think, just quitting it, but suspending it, calling for an investigation from the Conservative Party into this nomination race to figure out what the heck is going on. From what I've gathered, some emails have been sent about her, bringing up articles that she wrote in 2012, and she's like a millennial, so that's a lifetime ago. Sounds like another party had access to the updated voters list for memberships that were sold, which is absolutely not okay. And then when I was tweeting about it, a friend of mine that works for the media had messaged me and was like, yeah, no, like we've been getting like emails about her from various groups. One of them was Aurora Chinese Concerned Parents or something like that. So these just random groups are now coming in. And yeah, so I think she has a right to be concerned. I think that the way that the Conservative Party is handling this isn't necessarily good either. I think that the message that we saw from the Director of Communications was rather backhanded and didn't really give too many people too much faith in the process. So I'll be curious where this all goes.
What was that message from the director?
Basically, Sarah Fisher was like, it's false. Her allegations are false. Moving on. And it's like, okay, but what is happening next? Like typically you will get some sort of statement from the Conservative Party, especially with a highly known candidate like this, where, you know, she was a National Post columnist. Everyone was projecting that she would be a rising star. For her to very publicly announce something like this and corruption potentially within the nomination process, you would think that you would see an actual release, like a press release, like something. Like, to me, this seems like PR 101, what you don't do. And yeah, she was just like, allegations are false. And it was like, no, what's happening next? And a lot of members were like, what is happening next? Is there an investigation? And some of the criticism that was coming out was a little bit ridiculous too. So
yeah, I think that's what I saw too. I saw the criticism where they were saying that, oh no, this is a person who wasn't going to win, so they're disgruntled and they're upset about it because she wasn't going to win anyway. And it's like, well, even if she wasn't going to win, like if that was a thing, you still can't have a corrupt process. And the other thing that I saw, and you might need to correct me a little bit, was the fact that they had said that the other candidate was favored by the party. Is that correct?
I don't know. I do know that he was the former MP, as far as I know, and then lost the election twice. And once you lose twice, you do have to get permission from the Conservative Party to run again. And he did get that permission to run again.
Is it possible that he would have still had the original list from when he would have run for a nomination before and then just reused it?
Oh, absolutely. Like there's potential that he had his own mailing list or his own contact database. But it seems like there were people that had just bought memberships receiving emails, which was the problem. And then there's also the problem that, you know, the party is saying that Sabrina was sending out emails to a list that she shouldn't have had. So that's also something where it's like, okay, that's also a problem. But anyone having access to the updated membership list is a problem. I've been involved with campaigns before. I've had access to Sims and C2G. I've had access to the voter base. And I know that the Conservative Party keeps that under pretty tight locks. And it has been brought up. I know she was on CBC the other night, Power and Politics, saying like there would be a digital footprint of some sort. So why is the party not investigating that?
Yeah, and it was interesting too because I think it was like signed off by an individual that doesn't actually even exist. Is that correct?
Yes, like that's what she was saying, is that all of the emails that her campaign had sent out were coming from her actual name, whereas this person was an unknown whatever. And that's another concern people are bringing up. They're like, okay, where is my data? Because it's a random no name. If it's sitting with another candidate, fine. But who is this random no name? Are they another candidate? Are they just some random that's being paid to bring Sabrina down? Are they just a random that hates conservatives? Who has that data and why? Because if you have that data, you have access to people's information, right? Where they live, their email, their phone number, like that's concerning.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what do you think is the motivation behind the Conservative Party of just trying to, at least from the outside looking in, trying to just kind of dust this off, say this isn't a thing and move on? Like, what do you think that motivation is, considering that they're going so high in the polls?
I think just trying to stay consistent with messaging and not, make too much of an issue out of something. However, they could have done this privately, and people are saying, oh, well, she only gave them 2 weeks. And like, really, she only gave them 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, but in a nomination race, 2 weeks is a very long time, especially when there's not much time left and the vote is going to take place. And a potential candidate that really didn't deserve to win because if they're corrupting the process or their campaign was involved in corruption, and they're voted in because the party didn't suspend the nomination. That's really all that needs to happen here. We're not near the election yet. Suspend the nomination race, investigate, and then at least people can be somewhat happy with the process, because there's been too many issues with the party lately where they have gotten involved with nominations or other nominations they haven't gotten involved in, like they are right now. And people are like criticizing whether or not those MPs deserve to be there because they may have been elected through a corrupted process.
Absolutely. And I guess that's more so my question is, I understand the idea of trying to be consistent in messaging, but we look at what happened with Han Dong with the Liberals. I would think this is an opportunity to be like, hey, our party's serious about transparency and we're going to get right to the bottom of this because we want to make sure we have fair elections here in our party, so then we have fair general elections here in this country.
First and foremost, Liberals have forgot about that entire Han Dong thing, because now they're like, yeah, the Conservative Party is corrupt, like through and through. Nominations are corrupt, whatever. It's like, what's the sunshine like in living in that glass house? Because holy man, are you serious? But yeah, this was a real opportunity, but this is sadly what nominations are like. And it's so funny because people that are not involved in the process or haven't seen how it plays out are always like, oh, you should run in politics. Why don't you get involved in politics? It's like, first time understanding what it's actually like behind closed doors. Everything from nomination races that open for a day and then close just to like slide somebody in, to parties actually getting involved and disqualifying candidates so another candidate wins with like less than half the membership sold, like special interest groups getting involved and using all their power to put it behind candidates. Like it's a true mess behind the scenes.
Yeah. And so I guess that's one question I have is like, like as you just mentioned, people saying that you should run for politics. They've told Josh and I that we should run for politics. We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago that was told that he should run for politics. But it's funny because like you even saying that about the nomination race, is that different at the provincial level versus the federal level? That's just an area that I don't know about.
In Saskatchewan, yes. Saskatchewan has open nominations for the Sask Party, which is our current government. So that makes a huge difference because the nominations are open. So if I don't like my MLA, I can contest her in the next leadership race nomination race if I wanted to. I wouldn't because she's great, but the party keeps their nominations pretty locked tight, right? So that's tough. And we see Gary Vidal, the Conservative MP for Northern Saskatchewan, is now departing. And he publicly stated one of the reasons I am leaving is because the party will not open a nomination for him to run where his riding now sits. He lives in Meadow Lake, and that riding now shifts into Rosemary Falks riding. And the riding redistribution changes his riding 23%.
Wow.
But the party says, listen, we're not going to open the nomination unless there's a 25% change. So that's kind of like, but it's like, but you'll open up nominations for a day for another candidate to just swoop in. but you're not going to protect your one MP who has been working on reconciliation with Indigenous communities since the moment he got elected. That's
wild. And I guess the question then is like, where is that codified then? Is that just something that the party makes up and is something just spread across the country based off of it being a federal party? Or is there some kind of something with Elections Canada around these nominations?
This would actually be in the Conservative Party's constitution. So when convention comes around, which they just had in September, there will be something called new constitution policies or amendments or whatever, and then new policies as well, and then amendments to the constitution and amendments to existing policies already. It's just constitution it's not the flowery part of convention that people enjoy, so they don't pay as much attention as the policy part, because the policy shapes the policy directive. So unfortunately, things like this are a big deal, but people aren't as like entertained by it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not the sexy thing, right? But
Absolutely. It reminds me, there was an individual here in Halifax. His name was Nader. He was running for the Conservative nomination of a riding here. And then eventually, this was all public. It's nothing that happened privately. But eventually, he then decided to move to Ontario, move to Toronto to a more favorable riding where he could possibly win. And just seems like that just seems to be in general, and this is not just specific to the Conservative Party, this happens across all parties, that's kind of how the game works almost in a lot of ways. The Conservatives do it, I find, to do it more often than others. But like, it just, it speaks again to I just wish there was a better word to say this, but the politicking that happens when these things take place. And I think you're right. There's a lot. You've opened our eyes to a lot, even just going to this conference just last month, where I'm like, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I was even unbeknownst to and didn't really understand. So the idea of like, this country is like, yeah, well, anyone can be prime minister. It's like, no, there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of things systems you have to understand, unfortunately, to be able to get there. And this, I think, is a prime example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all very political, and it's like that with every party. I remember a thread years ago, even on the Liberals, a former Liberal, I think it was a former Liberal, had made a thread basically saying like the Liberal Party is fantastic at creating more Liberals. And this would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had tweeted out saying that there was an awful amount of like Liberal ministers and staffers like looking at my LinkedIn. And I went down the rabbit hole of one of them that was viewing my LinkedIn. And like, he went from being a salad artist, which no hate, my first job was A&W, but like I wasn't working at A&W and then working for one of the ministers a month later.
Right.
But all of his like job history was like door knocking for the Liberals, helping on Liberal campaigns. I'm like, dang, I wish, because it's not the same. And that was one of the critiques of the Conservative Party as well, is that it's not as easy to like go up the ranks and just like, yeah, like I don't know any Conservatives that are hiring, from fast food jobs into ministers' offices.
Absolutely. I mean, there's something that Reg and I even noticed when we were on the Hill, was just the gaggle of intern groups that were just kind of running around the Hill. And that was just like, that was the system right there. Like, it was a great example of like, yeah, these people, they get internships or they get some type of connection to the party through some type of program. And then eventually they're working for one of the minister's offices. And I think that you said that is something the Liberals are really good at. And that's kind of what they do. Whereas it feels like the Conservatives, because of the way that their policies and views on things work, they want to have a little bit more industry experience when it comes to dealing with specific things. And obviously I know people are laughing when they hear that, like, well, Polio's been in politics since the day he was born, since he was sucking on his thumb. Mm-hmm. But like, that's in general though, if you compare the Liberals to the Conservatives, that's kind of what happens. It's what I've learned. I could be mistaken. You can correct me on that though.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And I find it funny because I watched that play out, like one of the biggest dunks from my haters is like, oh, she was a political staffer. It's like, yeah, but if I actually talked about how that came to be, if anything, it makes the party look better because number one, I didn't work for the party directly, but my MP has been elected since 2008. And I applied for a job with him at the end of 2017, fresh out of university with no political experience whatsoever or political involvement. I had not so much as knocked on a door, had a membership, pounded a sign, nothing. And I was interviewed for that job and was given that job without at any point being asked what my political affiliation was. The only thing that my MP had wanted was somebody that was involved in the community, and that I was. I sat on various boards and came from my university having sat on like the anti-racism, anti-oppression board, and he wanted someone that could work with Indigenous communities as well, since there's a lot of them in the riding. And even come election time, it was like, if you want to help, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And it's like, wow, like I have immense amount of respect looking back for that. That to me speaks volumes. Because there was never, I never had to do any favors or utilize, my parents that didn't exist, especially politically, to like help me get ahead or anything like that. It was literally about hard work and then being recognized for that. And one of the things that stood out to me was in my interview with my MP, he asked if I had any siblings. And I said, yeah, I was the youngest of 4. And he said, oh, wow, there must have been a lot of like it would have been hard to eat around the dinner table because 4 kids is expensive to feed. And I said, actually, 2 of them didn't grow up with me because I was in foster care and then raised by my grandparents. He was like, oh, wow, like, I'm sorry to hear that. And I left that interview telling my husband, there's no way I got this job. And I was offered the job. So it's like he took this shy, quiet kid that like was scared of everybody, and we still laugh about it, and gave me an opportunity. And to me, that's what it should be about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, meritocracy. Imagine that. People that represent the people. We love to see it. And I kind of like slides us into a very interesting topic, right? Where I've been seeing this, it's discouraging lately. I hate it, is seeing the hypocrisy coming from those on the left side of the aisle, where if you are come from a specific walk of life and you don't vote a specific way, then all of a sudden the names come out. All of a sudden the ugliness rears its head. All of a sudden everything that side claims to be against, they all of a sudden are supporting, and making sure they shout you down. I've been seeing a lot of it online lately. I'm curious if you're seeing it as well. It's just like right now, it just feels like it's right in my face, and it's starting to tick me off, if I'm being honest.
Am I seeing the hypocrisy? Yes, I'm seeing it and I'm living it. It's unfortunate. It's been going on for a long time, but now as we see this rise in the movements from the left to just be the gatekeepers of all things positive and diversity and inclusion and whatever, a lot of them are really struggling with what that actually means. I got into it with a creator yesterday because she didn't like that I critiqued the NDP's communication strategies. And like the NDP supporters on that video went full horseshoe theory with PPC, where they were like, yeah, this video has 100,000 likes. It's like, okay, do you think that's going to win you the election now? Because that's legitimately what the PPC thought in the last election. So I had noticed in the comments of this creator's video that she was like, yeah, she said resignating instead of resonating. Go correct her, please. So I was getting like all these comments, like whatever. So I made a follow-up video being like, yeah, sometimes I mess up words, especially like, it's actually really sad if you think about it, because these are people that pretend to be so inclusive, right? No space for hate. And it's like, if you actually think about it, I had some pretty heavy shit happen really early on in my life, being apprehended, going through foster care, having an entirely new family, a different home when I was raised by my grandparents. And I struggled so much in school because of how different I was. I was also bullied for not being raised by my parents, which was really hard to deal with. But I dealt with, even when I got to like be 12, 13, 14 years old, I watched a brother go through really heavy addictions and substance abuse. And then in my early 20s, saw a sibling that started in that path as well, and then eventually died from it. There were significant barriers in my life, and a learning disability was a part of that. And now that I've been an adult and have went through assessments and diagnoses, it was severe, like very, very severe. The fact I even graduated high school and went on to university amazes me. But her followers were also like making fun of that. They're like, yeah, she made an entire video about her ADHD. Ha ha ha. It's like, okay, like, wow, you guys are so damn ignorant and you're so lost. And that creator was like, I'm not even like an NDPer. I'm so far left. No, you're not. Because the actual leftists I know that are like super left, kind of anti-government, don't go around policing other people, their opinions, making them feel crappy voting the way that they do. But then for that one person to come swooping in with the watermelon emoji and then being like, yeah, this is why residential schools existed. Go back to school. I'm like, holy man. And I'm in the car with my husband and I'm like, damn, like, it's not so much that like these people can hurt me, but it's the fact that our country is built off of systemic oppression. Residential schools are our darkest stain on our history. And in your mind, it's so like you have the capacity to make fun of somebody for that. You're evil at this point. Like there's no saving that. Like but it's hypocrisy, right? Like if I were that creator, it's like I would, number one, tell these people to knock it off, because I have had it out with creators before where like my followers have not been nice to these people and I find out about it and I'm like, oh man, like please don't go down that path. Don't send people like on the live threats. Don't be ignorant. Don't be making fun of the way they look or anything like that. But yeah, to openly tell your followers to come to me, like you did that. You openly told them to come to me. And then that's what they come with. No words.
Yeah. Well, I said to Josh earlier, I said, it's the egalitarian left, right? Coming in here being like, we got to shut down these conservatives because they hate women, they hate diversity and all this stuff. And then you see the vitriol that's spewed. And like you said, just like at a level of racism that, it would be like telling a Jew to go to a concentration camp. Like it's horrific. And then for that to be what they're saying. And then in the same breath being like, we can't support Pierre Poilievre and his white supremacy. It's like, really? Because you seem to be pretty okay with it there.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do want to go back to your comment there about, the leftists that I know don't stand for these things. And I'll say this about that creator in particular. They are very clear that they said, yeah, they're further left. And which shows to me, based on obviously their screen name too, that they identify with the ideology of communism, which is actually based on what they said and what they stand for is actually, it's hand in hand. It's right there. It's an ideology that has murdered millions upon millions of people. So it's actually spot on, if I'm being honest. And I just want to make that clear because, like, to the actual leftists, like, this is not reflective of them whatsoever. And, like, who are actually fair and who actually believe in loving people and empathizing with people. There's things I'll disagree with them fiscally, for sure. But, yeah, this was something else, and there's no space for it whatsoever. And unfortunately, these extremists that really are driving a lot of the rhetoric in our country, unfortunately.
There was a leftist creator who I believe is an NDP supporter that made a video about me today, and I posted it to my stories, and you can go watch it. She basically, I think it's Gen X to the left or something like that. And she made this comment full of tons of compliments about me, which she didn't need to do, but she had pointed out a couple things that I didn't even really think about, but that obviously stuck for her. And she said, yeah, like when I first had seen Jennifer on my For You page, it was because she was fighting with another content creator that said Pierre Poilievre is on drugs. So it was that infamous little spat that I had with that content creator that's now saying I'm paid by the Conservative Party, which good thing she faded off into the wind where she belongs. But this content creator was like, yeah, she reached out to me and asked if she could stitch me and was very respectful about it. And I did. I stitched her. And then since then, we've had like private conversations. And she's like, yeah, a few weeks ago, like conservatives were being really mean in my comment section. And Jennifer came in basically telling them to like grow up and knock it off. And in my mind, that didn't even stick with me. I just thought it was the right thing to do. So I said it and moved on. But for her, that spoke about my character to her. And it's like, I don't need to be complimented or publicly praised for doing the right thing. Like if conservatives are being rude, I have no problem telling conservatives. And it's hilarious to these people that are like, oh, she's paid by the Conservative Party or she's a right winger or whatever. It's like, I literally fought with conservatives all week. So me posting that video about the NDP was switching it up a little bit. It's like, I'm not paid by anybody, nor do I need to be towing anyone's line. It's just, I have my feelings, my values, and my morals about how I feel about things. And politically, I'm not going to be told what to do. But if you're going to come at me with racism to try to like belittle me into thinking like you, it's not going to work.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And like, that's the part that I kind of struggle with. It's like, what are you trying to gain? Is it just really that you're just trying to be vengeful and satisfy some weird urge that you have to rip somebody else down? Are you actually trying to get her to see the light? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is it that you're trying to gain? Because if you really are trying to get people to come to your side, that's not going to work. And that's what I see with a lot of this content too, because I follow a couple different creators, and there was a couple that at a point in time I had followed and I had to unfollow them because when I was looking at their stuff, I was like, man, you have one you have one way of talking about one person and then you have a completely different way of talking about another person. It just feels disingenuous and just wrong. It feels like the ick. It feels gross. And so when I look at it, I'm just like, how do you think that you're going to get people to your side? And I've just noticed that they don't care. They don't want people to come to their side because they feel like they're so right and that they're so beyond reproach, that they're almost at this religious state of self-righteousness that they don't care. And that to me is where I keep running into problems, because I'm like, get off your pedestal, come down, realize that these people are people like you and I, and they need to be treated with respect.
Well, and even like with that NDP video, there's a lot of misunderstanding on how things actually work. And like, I'm a data-driven person and have obviously been, pointing to the public opinion polls for a very long time. I've actually been involved with the creation and distribution of polling, not in any way political. It was actually for something completely different. But it amazes me that in the last election, Jagmeet Singh was doing his most TikToking. And people were like, yeah, this is innovative, including me. I remember he did the shower trend and everyone's like, what is this? And I was like, he's appealing to young voters. And like, it seems to be working. Like they're loving his content. It's doing really well. He was doing TikTok dances with his wife, but then it didn't resonate in the Canadian election results. Mm-hmm. And now that's what it's trying to explain this to these people. It's like, okay, he's appealing to young voters who are the most underrepresented when it comes to voting. They're not showing up in as high numbers, but at what stake is he doing that at? So he's appealing to young voters that are still, majority of them are supporting Pierre Poilievre right now, it appears, which is fine, whatever. But if he's abandoning the older generation who think it's cringe and can't stand it, then where is the middle ground? Because you have to be good at both. Mm-hmm. So Pierre Poilievre won't do the trends. He won't even go to a hockey game. He could loosen up a little bit is what he could do. But he's speaking to like the younger folks by like, I want you to be able to afford a house. Let's talk about the Canadian dream. You used to be able to work hard and be able to afford these things. And Jagmeet Singh is like, I'm going to do this TikTok trend with the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. And I'm going to win the election. And then his like people that love him are like, he ate with that. And I'm like,
he cooked.
Can we just fast forward to the next election now so that I can come back and be like, what'd I tell you?
Yeah.
I did with the PPC. I bookmarked all their tweets and then I went back and reminded them.
I'm sure you did. Well, I mean, that's what I'm sure your drafts are all fired up right now. They're all loaded up, ready to go for when we get that election. So we'll see how it goes.
I have a folder on Twitter called "Didn't Age Well." And it's a bunch of bookmarks.
I do have one thing I have to ask you. I'm getting discouraged, and you're gonna laugh about this. I'm starting to hear from friend groups right now where there's like, Josh, I got a question for you. I'm like, yeah, what's up? And they said, I've been hearing that Pierre Poilievre wants to ban abortion in Canada, and that's why I just can't get on board with him. And so, obviously, the three of us on this conversation know that's BS and so untrue and so not a part of what they're talking about. But the messaging from the Liberals and NDP have been very effective in painting that, apparently, painting him with that, because the people I'm talking to, like people I respect, and the fact that that's the narrative that they're getting is very interesting to me, that this is working. What are you seeing out there?
When all else fails, bring up abortion. Pierre Poilievre is actually in a really unique spot, and I was thinking about this today, how much it must suck to be him, because he is like the worst person on planet Earth when it comes to women's rights, apparently, according to the left. And then the worst person on planet Earth when it comes to social conservatives, because the left is like, he's going to take away all bodily autonomy and ban abortion and ban freedom of choice, which during the pandemic, anyways, not even going to get into that because it's not worth it. But anyways, they're like, yeah, like bodily autonomy is like our number one priority now. And the social conservatives are like literally on their websites, like Campaign Life Coalition, which is one of the biggest not social conservative, but like abortion, like anti-abortion advocacy groups. And they're like, don't vote for Pierre Poilievre because he's pro-choice and pro-LGBTQ ideology. And it's like, he cannot win. And then the other day, his wife was on Instagram doing like a Q&A, and someone's like, what's your stance on abortion? She's like, pro-choice, and just like so casual about it. And it's like, he there is like this divide in the Conservative Party that people from the outside don't necessarily see. But it's like, you think Aaron O'Toole wasn't annoyed as all hell when Kathy Wagenthal introduced that private members bill on sex-selective abortions before the 2021 election? It's annoying, but also if you're going to be conservatives and talk about freedom and talk about the ability to vote on things of conscience like you praise, and, you know, I have my own thoughts on things, but limiting elected officials and what private members bills they can put forward is not one of them. When you're in government, you're a team player, and Pierre Poilievre using his ability as the prime minister to say, listen, if you're in cabinet, you're not putting forward any abortion legislation, and we're also not passing it, fine. But it's a sacrifice, right? If you want to be putting forward sex selective abortion bills or whatever it is, you're going to sit in the back bench, which she probably will, and you can put forward whatever you want, but we're not going to pass it, but we're going to allow you that democratic opportunity to still put it forward if you so choose.
Right. And it's funny. I don't know if there was something that came out in the last week or 2 weeks about it, because when Josh had mentioned this before the show started, I said, I had the same conversation like with another individual. And she was like, well, we all know what, it's funny because she used your line, Josh. She was like, we all know what happens in the States just comes right up to Canada.
Yeah.
And she's like, we thought abortion was safe in the States. And she's like, now it's going to be under attack in Canada because Pierre's he's going to use the notwithstanding clause to pass abortion.
Gosh.
I was like, oh, there's so much wrong with this statement.
Arnold Viersen, a conservative MP who is one of the like social conservatives, I think he's backed by one of the interest groups, not 100% sure on that, put forward a petition last week in the House of Commons with 47 signatures to like bring up abortion. But again, he's elected MP. He brought up a petition that was brought to him. Like, we can't start micromanaging to the point where we're picking and choosing, because where is the line drawn?
Yeah.
But Pierre does have this unique work cut out for him. He's going to be managing them in his caucus like Stephen Harper did. I would say that Stephen Harper is more socially conservative than Pierre was. So I would say you're going to see less of that under a Poilievre government than you did under a Harper government. But I mean, if liberals were this concerned about it, they could have regulated it under the Health Act like they did plan to do. They promised to do it and they didn't do it.
Right. And it's just funny because we even witnessed that when we were at the Strong and Free conference, and they would mention some kind of social issue, and you'd see 3/4 of the room cheer for it, and then, you know, 1/4 of the room sit down, and then you would have the opposite come up. I think it was like with the conversation with Tony Abbott and
Boris Johnson.
I was like, stupid hair, what's his name? Anyway, and then you just see the other room, like side of the room, just like cheer for one thing, and it was hilarious because it was like, wow, this umbrella is wide. It covers a lot of people, and so
it doesn't just cover conservatives either. And I had this conversation with someone the other day. I work a lot on child welfare work, Bill C-92, which is giving autonomy over child welfare back to the nations. One of the largest conversations right now is, when does life begin? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about child welfare, and we're talking about protecting kids, especially if they're apprehended, keeping them within the community. But there is a very real conversation right now because a lot of Cree, I'm Cree from Saskatchewan. In our teachings, we believe that the concept of life begins at conception. So it's like we're having this conversation all the time where we're like, okay, we also need to protect pregnant mothers and ensure that we're giving them the resources and whatever necessary. But it's like, if someone comes to me and they're like, yeah, no, like that's not, because really it's like one of those open conversations right now where people are like, well, when does life actually begin? And it's like, it's a cultural thing as well. It's not just a social conservative thing. I've never like crossed over, like I've never had any conversations like this with social conservatives because I'm not a social conservative. But it's just interesting because it's like, that's something in my teachings. Like it's,
yeah. And you know? One of the funniest things I actually heard was people saying like, oh, if you actually believe that happens, you know, life begins at conception, they're like, that's when those child benefit tax credits need to start flowing. And I was like, you know what? That'd actually be really helpful. That'd be really great.
Well, yeah, I really had to get into it just because like I was annoyed, if I'm being honest. That fact I was hearing about it, I was like, man, I was just kind of bummed out the messaging was working the way it was, because I was like, man, like that's so far from the truth and so far from what's actually being discussed. And, you know, and that's the issue too, right? And I thought you brought up a good point, was the argument brought to me is like, well, MPs are bringing it up in the House, this and that. I'm like, yeah, well, because they represent a constituency that believe in that. So they have to represent these people. But that's not the majority of Canada. So I think that will be left alone, pure and simple.
Did you notice it's never people in like the high rankings of Poilievre's shadow cabinet either? It's never people he's touring around with. It's never his MPs front and stage and center. Aside from Leslyn Lewis, she's a social conservative, which is why I think she's in the front bench, because she was a leadership candidate that represented that entire population of the Conservative Party. I don't even know if she brings up abortion, though. I think she's kind of gone down the WEF train. But anyway, she talked about in her leadership that she was very pro-life, but has also said like she's not gonna broach that at this point now. Like that's just kind of how this is going.
Yeah, because it seems like you said, Jen, because I follow her on Twitter now and I love reading all her tweets. She just really hates the WEF. She's like, if there's one thing I can accomplish when we have the Poilievre government, it's that we're pulling out of anything WEF.
God bless Leslyn Lewis, baby. I'm here for it, baby. Here we go.
And it's funny because I think we talked on this show maybe a year or two ago when I first came on. I actually was a part of, it's called the Global Shapers. So it's a branch of the WEF. So I actually had my inside view of all that. Ooh. And so I was a curator during the pandemic, and I got to see all the ugliness of that organization, where we were like, I'm leading a group of 50 young people who are really great people, all trying to like do social change. So working on things like employment opportunities for disadvantaged individuals, working with homelessness groups, working with food banks, shelters, kind of trying to do all that work. And then you have all of that being shut down, and WEF coming back to us and going, we need metrics. So you need to get out there and be doing stuff. And we're like, it's a pandemic. Everything's been locked down and we're all struggling with our mental health right now. Can you provide us any support? They're like, well, no, it's a pandemic. We lost all our funding. So you need to do more so that you can make us look good so we can use your headlines to get more funding for ourselves. I was like, oh, I hate you. I just like left. I was done.
Left the WEF, baby. Just like Leslyn Lewis is saying.
Yep.
Oh, yeehaw.
Isn't the World Economic Forum in Switzerland? Like, I don't know, if they reached out to me and they're like, you want to come to Switzerland? I'd be like, yeah.
So that's the thing is, the Global Shapers, they do send all the curators. So it's basically like it's almost like a franchise model. Like they have hubs all around the world in different cities all around the world. And so you have curators who lead these groups of individuals, and they do all get sent to Davos to attend a big event. And I didn't get to go because
you know what?
A pandemic.
It was probably for the best, man. That place sucks.
I can already imagine the comments. Reg is a globalist.
Yo,
I'll be on there with my big
dude, 100%. Our YouTube comments are 100% going to be that right now.
But you know what was funny though? One of the things that was kind of ugly that came out of that though was some of the folks on the far right, the extremists. They were actually like doxing people and being like, you need to go find these young global shapers that are out there trying to ruin our communities, and like sending people hate and sending people racist things and like threats. So yeah, it was not pretty. As much as I was like hating the WEF, like the people within the global shapers situation, like they're generally
innocent bystanders.
They are the innocent bystanders. They're people who just genuinely want to make their community better, and they're caught up in a structure that is not great.
And the shapers are different from the WEF. We'll say that they're attached, but they're different.
Yeah, because there's like three branches. You have WEF, you have Young Global Leaders, I think it's called. Yeah, and that's the thing that Trudeau was. Yeah, and then you have Global Shapers, which was the group that was supposed to be for the young people.
He was a step below Trudeau, you know.
How do you even know this?
What's that?
How do you even know this?
Because I was a curator. I was in this.
It's almost like some of us did research during the pandemic, Jen. Come on now.
I did my own research. Sounds like something a globalist would say. But it's fine. They've all moved on to talking about the clouds now, so I think you're safe.
True.
That's so true.
Dude, yeah. Shout out those clouds, man. Were you working on a green screen? Is that what was happening in your TikToks?
No, but I just like filmed a video and someone's like, what's going on with those clouds? Look totally normal, right? I'm like, and I went back to pictures I took that day. I'm like, they're clouds. My husband's like, I think they're talking about chemtrails.
Oh no.
That's exactly what they were talking about.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. And that's why I said, I was like, you wait till they see the Northern Lights. They're going to be really freaked out by those, which were spectacular.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Jennifer, we're coming in the last minute here. Let us know, is there anything you want to hit on before we end off?
No, because once I get started, it's game over for everybody.
We'll give you another 15 if we have to, okay?
No.
Awesome.
I just wish people would be kind to one another and stop being racist on the internet.
Imagine requesting that. That's crazy.
Remember I said that bar so low that you can trip over it.
Just please, like, whatever you do, if you like don't like my opinions or like where I stand politically, that's fine. But we can do that without bringing up residential schools to make our point.
Seriously, though.
Yeah.
Oh, amen to that, sister. Holy jumping. Well, we appreciated so much having you on. Thank you for sharing your perspective and what's been going on here at the Conservative nomination race. And hopefully that gets cleared up sooner rather than later so we can have a little more faith in our election processes here in the country. Well, that was always insightful. Always a good time to have Jennifer on and get through all the stuff that's going on from her perspective, what's going on in politics, and just continue to clarify, get through the muck and the mire, and hopefully the Conservative Party really figures that out at some point, because that needs to stop.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I also appreciate this fact where she has such good inside knowledge of being a staffer and then having her poli-sci degree and all that background to be able to answer these questions about, like, what are those inner workings of things. And then, like you said, finishing it off with that note of kindness. Mm-hmm. Be better.
Yeah, please. We out here, we want to keep bringing love, and or as Doug Ford say, we believe in peace and love in this country. Yeah. Speaking of peace and love, we got some immigration policy protests erupting in various parts of the country. PEI really been seeing some protesters happening. So what's been going on is immigrants to PEI with soon to expire work permits are continuing to protest in downtown Charlottetown. Island workers with expiring permits in the retail and food service sectors will likely not have their documents renewed due to recent changes to the province's immigration streams and provincial nominee program that will prioritize construction, healthcare, and childcare workers. We want them to grandfather us in, and we want them to listen to what is right, says Rupinder Pal Singh, an internet and technology sales representative who lived in Charlottetown for 1.5 years. His work permit is set to expire in 2 months. So what's really been happening is the PEI has been kind of refocusing their budget and kind of focusing more like healthcare and housing. And they just really are kind of like tightening up what they're doing with work permits from immigrants in their province. And so the people that are currently here are like, can you grandfather us into your new plan? And the province is like, likely not. Unfortunately, when these permits are up, you got to go back to where you came. And unfortunately. And so it's just kind of always tough situations because I've been seeing this and seeing their protests online, and you're starting to see a lot of the discontent that people are having towards outsiders to this country. And people's like, yeah, I hope they deport them. I hope they go. We don't have room for them here. There's just a lot of just vitriol that's coming out about this, and it's coming to the surface. And I was talking to my wife about this, and she's like, yeah, like, you know, we're doing some research. It's just like when valuable resources are at stake, it's amazing what starts coming out of people's characters. And that's kind of what's happening here, where it's like people are just having it's starting to build the discontent and unfavorability of view of immigrants in Canada now because of the healthcare systems in shambles, housing's in shambles, people can't get jobs. And it's just unfair to these people as well, because they are brought here on a promise and they can't get the housing. They can't get healthcare either. And now everyone here hates them. So it's just, they're put in a tough spot, man. And it's just unfortunate. And, you know, they're asking for help in these protests, and there's not a whole lot coming, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's funny because we saw the same thing happen during COVID, right? It was just some interesting colors come out of folks, especially
no pun intended.
Yeah. Especially out of the Maritimers. And I can say this because I am one, born and raised Maritimer.
Oh.
And yeah, we're not nice when things are starting to get a little tight, like you said, resources, things that people need, housing, we need jobs, we need healthcare, and these things are at risk. Yeah, Maritimers get ugly. And it was also, like I said, the same thing happened during COVID, when I thought was funny because there was actually a rental car that had plates from Quebec on it, because as we know, rental car companies have cars from registered all over the place. And this poor person had driven it to the grocery store and had their tires knifed And they're like, it was just a rental. Like, I live here. But yeah, so people can be, speaking of kindness, people can be a little unkind, and it's especially ugly in the Maritimes, you know, the place where people are just so friendly and so nice.
Absolutely. This little thing that was interesting, the kind of was an interesting turn I found with this was that I believe it was the leader of the Communist Party, PEI, came in support of these protesters.
Hi, I'm Eden. I'm part of the Revolutionary Communist Party here in PEI, and I'm here with Rupinder. So, what's been going on? Why are you guys protesting?
We are protesting because last year, July 2023, PEI government changed the rule overnight and we were not even notified. This is the reason we are protesting here, because rules were made all of a sudden and they didn't give us enough time to make our decisions, and we were stuck at the same jobs.
So, what are your demands from the province?
We have 3 demands from the province.
So it kind of goes on to tell the story. But again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where just like the Revolutionary Communist Party of PEI is now coming out in support. And where have they been for however long? It just seems so opportunistic on so many levels. And I'm just eye rolling all of it. I'm like, you don't care. Get out of here.
Well, yeah, it's what we talked about in the other segment. It's, somebody coming in and exploiting people who are desperate. And then they're like, well, we liked your thing, so now you can like ours. The only thing that I have to disagree with him on is that immigration into the country is a privilege. And unfortunately, when resources are scarce, you do have to take care of your citizens first. And that's the unfortunate part, is that right now what we need from immigration is not software salespeople. We've got tons of that, unfortunately. So I feel for them. I do. And I know I dunked on Maritimers because I can. They're my people. I still love you. But at the same time, I do understand where, like I said, immigration into this country is a privilege. And unfortunately, when we are overflowing with people that are skilled in a certain area, you either need to create a plan to upskill into a necessary trade or area of work, or you need to make other plans. And it's unfair, it's unkind, and it's just a sad reality of the economy that we're in. If the economy was better, we wouldn't be seeing this kind of situation. Yeah. But that's where the buck stops.
Yeah, and that is the reality too, was we can look back of who was your immigration minister. And that's how we got to this spot in the first place. Is, as I said, we're in just a tough spot. And we can't service we have to look after the citizens first, unfortunately. That's just the spot we've been put in. But these people were brought in on a promise that they're going to get a better life here. And they got screwed by the federal government. And that sucks.
You know what? It almost sounds like they are Canadian citizens, because that's kind of how we've all been feeling too. Maybe they should stay. But honestly, it's exactly what you said. I mean, we have to realize that there was an immigration minister who's now a housing minister. Funny how that happened, but that problem was created, and now he's trying to solve the other problem from the problem he created in the first place. And like I said, if these people want to stay and they really do care about being here, and I don't think protesting is going to do anything.
No,
but I do think that if they were to build a case and say, listen, my spouse is a nurse or a CCA, a continuing care assistant, or, I'm actively looking at getting into the trades, or, you know what I mean? Like, build your case to stay, then, explain how you're building up the rest of the economy and how you're building up the community that you're in. Maybe you're a software sales, but you are actively working at the soup kitchen. You're actively, you know what I mean? Like, build a narrative for yourself so that when you go out in front of the cameras and you're talking about how you contribute to this country and how you contribute to society, it's not through the lens of the microphone of the communists, the radical revolutionary. Is that what it is?
The Revolutionary Party.
Yeah.
Communist Party, PEI. Yeah. And that's where it comes down to, and this is where it really breaks my heart, because we've brought in a lot of low-skilled labor, and that's what's causing a lot of and unfavorable perspectives that people are having towards immigrants. And I feel it's unfair to these people, unfortunately, because they didn't do this. This was the operation of a government that's ill-prepared. And because at least like beforehand, we would used to bring in a lot of high-skilled immigration. and people had a lot of huge favorability of immigrants. It was like, yeah, they came here on a promise. They worked really hard. They made roots here, and they made things happen.
And like you said, they brought their skills and abilities with them
Exactly.
too.
And that's, unfortunately, that's the latest wave of immigration that's happened. That's not, they didn't follow that. And now we have low skilled people here. And this is what they're now facing, is the low skilled wage workers are now facing that they have to go home because we don't have need for those skills here.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's thanks.
It does. And like, nobody's winning in this.
No.
Like, that's the thing, is like, there's no good outcome for anybody here. It's just, it's a last ditch effort to save the economy, basically, because they've been trying to prop up the economy and make it look better by adding more people.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that, because I was at a conference last week when I was virtual here for the podcast, and I got to sit at a table with a renowned economist, and that was one of the things he said. He's like, we're not measuring GDP accurately in this country, and it drives him insane. And he said that the more people we keep adding to this, he said, the more flowery our economy looks, our GDP looks. And he's like, and the economy doesn't look like that.
Gee.
And so that's what's happening, right? You know, we're bringing in people just to bump up the numbers and make it look good.
And then two things are going to happen here at PEI, which sucks either way. It sucks for them. It's either you're going to end up finding a way to keep these people, and then you're going to really get people really ticked off, or they're going to, quote unquote, be deported. And that's going to fire up a lot of people too. There's no winning in this. It's going to be bad either way this happens. So the one thing we'll leave with on this story is the same thing that Jennifer left with. Regardless, I know things are scary right now. Things are uncertain. But just continue to love your neighbor through all this. I know it's hard, but keep being a good human being regardless of what's happening.
Yeah, and especially don't use the racism.
Yeah.
Yeah, be kind.
Yeah. Please don't. You know, we don't want to devolve to racism here. But yeah, speaking of wildcard segments.
Love that transition. We got nothing. Be kind. Also, this is funny.
Yeah. Just because it's a little savage. So these guys, I found this so funny. It's a group of guys who create these terrible petitions and circulate them to see if people sign them. And dude, I got 3 of them to show you. It's so
Okay,
funny,
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'll hit you hard here.
Would you like to sign a petition? It's for a really good cause. We actually want to test weapons on homeless people. Why are you laughing?
Sorry, keep going.
So basically, we just felt like they were the best people to test it on. Can you just sign your name right here?
I'm so good, thank you.
You don't like this one?
Nah.
Can I interest you in one more?
Is it of the same?
No, it's different.
Okay.
So we want to remove all homeless shelters. We just feel like...
You said it was different. What do you have against homeless people?
No, this is to help them.
That's not to help them.
No, trust, look. Let me explain. We just feel like the shelter is giving them a sense of security to lean back on and want to put them back into the streets to get that hustle mentality. Basically, we just want them to work harder. So yeah.
Nah, I'm good, bro.
You sure?
I'm so positive, thank you.
I love that. Nah, listen.
No, listen, here. There's bars to this, all right? This is sweet stuff. Listen up. But here we are. I'm gonna rapid fire these. There are 2 more.
I'm loving it.
Here we go.
Revoke all women's license. You ever been driving and like someone's just driving crazy? You look in the window, it's like a woman.
Yeah, that's usually me.
You ever like pull up to like a parking space? They took up 2 spots. Yeah, it's usually done by a woman.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just sign your name like right here. So here's fine.
No.
Yeah, dude.
No.
Yeah. It was too good, bro. I was cracking up. I was like, geez, she really just told on herself on that one.
Yeah, I feel like that was kind of just like a self burn to like make it stop. You know what I mean?
I'm sure
It's
she's like, just get out of my face.
you know.
I'm out of here. We'll give her the benefit of the doubt. It gets worse though, bro.
Okay,
It gets
ready.
worse. Last one hurts the most, okay?
Petition. It's for a really good cause.
What is it?
So right here, we want to revoke all women's licenses. Have you ever like just pulled up to like a parking spot and like it was just like horrible parking? Like they took 2 spaces.
The women were driving.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Yeah, I know.
You want to sign it? Yeah. It's really annoying, huh?
Yeah, I know. Oh, what a guy.
All right, so we have a few more. So this one, we want to remove all women from schools. we feel like they're getting too smart, and we don't want them in the government anymore. So if we just get them out to schools, they can't go to the government. Yeah, so you want to sign that?
No, let's skip that one.
Skip that one? All right.
Oh, good.
We're glad.
Good.
I don't want to seem like too.
Yeah, I feel. Okay. So right here, we want to increase the wage gap between men and women. So we want men to be making more. We just want the women
like
to stay in the kitchen, basically.
I like that.
You like
I
it?
like that.
Right there.
He signs it. This is brutal, man.
Oh my God.
Dude, that killed me. Those videos been killing me all week, dude. They're so ridiculous.
Just
Yo, we got bars. Straight facts, bro. Facts. Yeah.
I just like how he's he didn't go for the middle one, like, you know, removing women's education.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't want to seem like I'm,
Yeah.
I don't want to seem bad. And then
But then you stay in the kitchen.
Yeah, he's like, yeah.
We want to educate them, but we don't want them to use it.
Yeah.
What a guy.
That's ridiculous. I love that.
That's such a funny thing.
I just started following an account on Instagram, and it's just like the worst comments that people put on videos. And I love it.
Dude.
Yeah, there's one. There's some bad ones.
some bad ones.
Not for the podcast.
No, not for the pod. But that humor, so. Awesome. Well, that was a good show, dude.
Yeah.
Dang good show. Well, it was good having you back on the show, man. In person.
Oh, thanks.
Because virtual was killing me last week. I couldn't do it, dude. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was weird just being the only person in here talking to this camera. And the camera's right where your head was. I was like, this is kind of weird, But it was cool having Stuart on last week. It was fun. Well, screw that. Whatever it is you're doing, whether you be watching some hockey,
finding some inappropriate memes on Instagram,
or cracking jokes with friends, or doing some gardening out in the backyard. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.